Ah, please, stop hitting me, help!
I was wrong, I really was.
Ah.
Through the gap in the storage cabinet, I saw a woman with her limbs chained, being beaten mercilessly. The more she begged, the harder he hit. With another blow, the woman let out a final scream and fell silent.
Ugh! I wanted to scream but could only cover my mouth tightly with both hands. The man committing this violence was none other than my boyfriend, Jason. Today was supposed to be our 1-year anniversary. I had left work early, bought a cake, and decorated his place, only to discover a hidden basement. This basement was dark and damp, and behind a pile of clutter, there was a woman chained up.
She seemed to have been held captive for so long that she was barely coherent, her body reduced to skin and bones. When she saw me, she desperately urged me to escape, saying that Jason was a dangerous man. She claimed to be Jason's ex-girlfriend, who had been locked up and tormented after he grew tired of her.
Not just me, but his ex before me, and the one before that, they were all harmed by him. I saw it with my own eyes.
The woman screamed, her bloodshot eyes nearly popping out. I couldn't believe it. How could my usually gentle and refined boyfriend do such things?
It wasn't until I hid in the cabinet and watched him brutally attack the woman that I had to accept the truth. If I didn't escape, I might be next. Taking advantage of Jason returning to his room, I fled the basement, so panicked that I forgot my shoes, and ran straight for the front door.
Just then, Jason, who should have been in the bedroom, suddenly grabbed me from behind. Ah! I screamed, trembling all over, but he was still immersed in the surprise I had prepared for him, holding me affectionately.
Baby, didn't you say you had to work late tonight? How did you find time to decorate my place? You made the bedroom so romantic, I'm almost moved to tears.
Yeah, right. You didn't even blink when you were hitting a living person just now.
But where were you hiding? I looked everywhere and couldn't find you.
Jason suddenly turned me around, his sharp eyes scrutinizing me.
Facing his cold gaze, my legs turned to jelly, and I stammered, I was hiding in the bathroom, just to give you a surprise. Hearing my explanation, Jason didn't press further. Instead, he lovingly took my hand and said, "Since you're here, let's make our candlelight dinner together. I even bought your favorite tomahawk steak."
If I left now, he would definitely get suspicious. So, I had no choice but to agree, my heart pounding the entire time. My eyes kept darting towards the basement. Was that woman really gone?
Baby, your dress looks amazing today. It makes your legs look so long and white. I love it.
Jason's voice suddenly sounded in my ear. I turned to see him holding a gleaming kitchen knife close to my legs, as if he was about to chop them off. Ah! I screamed again in fright, and in my panic, I bumped into the table behind me.
Sarah, are you afraid of me? Why have you been so tense since earlier? Did you see something?
Jason instantly became alert, the sharpness in his eyes terrifying me to the core. If I didn't leave now, I might not survive the night.
Jason, I'm not feeling well today. I think I need to go home.
Not feeling well? What's wrong?
It might be that time of the month.
Under my strong insistence, Jason reluctantly let me go. Clinging to this last lifeline, I grabbed my keys and drove off without looking back. But just when I needed it most, the car wouldn't start.
As I anxiously searched for the problem, Jason's sinister face suddenly appeared in the car window.
All 4 of your tires are slashed, that's why the car won't move, he explained.
Slashed? But they were fine when I arrived. I quickly got out to check, and sure enough, all 4 tires were flat, making it impossible to drive.
It must be those kids from next door playing pranks. My tires have been slashed several times too.
Jason's nonchalant expression suggested he had already prepared an excuse. I've been here many times and never seen any kids around. He did it on purpose, to keep me from leaving.
Fine, I'll just call a cab.
I hurried outside to hail a taxi, but the street was deserted. Not a single car in sight. I tried several ride-hailing apps, but Jason's house was in the suburbs, and after half an hour, no one accepted the ride.
Looking back, Jason was silently following me, his deep gaze even more eerie in the dark night.
Sarah, it's really late. You won't find a cab now. Since you're not feeling well, why not rest at my place?
Jason walked up to me, trying to persuade me to go back. But knowing he was a dangerous person, how could I dare to follow him? Just when I was about to lose hope, the roar of a motorcycle approached. I turned around in surprise to see several guys with dyed hair speeding by on motorcycles, cheering and tossing stolen bags onto the road. The men on the back seats were holding machetes, still stained with blood.
The recent crime spree in the city was well known, and these were clearly the wanted criminals from the news. Jason quickly pulled me into the shadows. Fortunately, they didn't notice us and soon disappeared down the street.
Sarah, it's so dangerous out here. You should come back with me.
Jason, thinking I was shivering from the cold, even took off his jacket to drape over me. On one side were the criminals, and on the other, a dangerous boyfriend. Either choice seemed like a dead end.
Before I could hesitate, Jason scooped me up and carried me back towards his house. Once inside, he took me straight to the bedroom, telling me to rest. But how could I rest? I broke free from his embrace and nervously hid in a corner. Clang! Just then, a loud noise came from the basement. Facing Jason's cold gaze, my legs turned to jelly. I stammered.
I was hiding in the bathroom, just to give you a surprise.
Jason didn't press further. Instead, he lovingly took my hand.
Since you're here, let's make our candlelight dinner together. I even bought your favorite tomahawk steak.
If I left now, he would definitely get suspicious. So, I had no choice but to agree, my heart pounding the entire time. My eyes kept darting towards the basement. Was that woman really gone?
Baby, your dress looks amazing today. It makes your legs look so long and fair. I love it.
Jason's voice suddenly sounded in my ear. I turned to see him holding a gleaming kitchen knife close to my legs, as if he was about to chop them off.
My mind went blank. When I came to, I saw blood pouring from Jason's chest.
Run!
Jason shouted at me, his clothes soaked in blood, his face contorted in pain.
He was so ruthless to me, but he's quite nice to you, isn't he?
The woman stood before us, her previously pitiful expression replaced by one of sheer mockery.
If he's willing to take a knife for you, he must really love you. How about this, why don't you join him?
With that, the woman raised the knife high, her eyes filled with a chilling intent.
Sarah, run!
Just as I was about to close my eyes in despair and accept my fate, Jason's shout pulled me back. I opened my eyes to see Jason tackling the woman to the ground, though she continued to struggle.
Only one word echoed in my mind, run. I stumbled out of Jason's house, my legs still weak. Behind me, I heard Jason's groan, knowing that the deranged woman must have broken free. Summoning the last of my courage, I ran with all my might to the street. The sound of maniacal laughter grew closer behind me, and my body was nearing its limit. Ahead was a corner, and I saw a glimmer of hope, sprinting towards it. A large dumpster appeared before me, emitting a nauseating stench. I had no choice but to dive in. At that moment, I couldn't help but feel grateful. I often dragged Jason around the neighborhood, so I knew the area well enough to find a hiding spot in this critical moment. Soon, the deranged woman appeared, knife in hand, panting heavily, clearly exhausted.
Running pretty fast, aren't you?
She muttered to herself as she continued the chase. Covered in blood and limping, she would have caused a commotion during the day, but at night, no one paid her any mind, allowing her to continue her pursuit.
What should I do? I stayed hidden in the dumpster, barely daring to breathe. I couldn't come out. The mind of a lunatic was beyond my comprehension.
Who knew if she might suddenly find something suspicious and come back? If she caught me. My phone had been lost in the chaos earlier, so I had no way to call the police. Vroom vroom. Just as I was sinking into despair, the sound of motorcycles approached. Peeking through a gap in the dumpster, I saw a gang of bikers. They must have found a new victim, holding a bag from a small brand worth about $500, dumping its contents on the ground: makeup, a phone, and a wallet.
People use mobile payments now, bags aren't worth much. We should go for jewelry instead.
Shut up. If you get the jewelry, you go sell it.
Instinctively, I touched the gold bracelet on my wrist, which had cost over $2,000, along with the other jewelry I was wearing. Facing his cold gaze, my legs turned to jelly, and I stammered.
I was hiding in the bathroom, just to give you a surprise.
Hearing my explanation, Jason didn't press further. Instead, he lovingly took my hand.
Since you're here, let's make our candlelight dinner together. I even bought your favorite tomahawk steak.
If I left now, he would definitely get suspicious. So, I had no choice but to agree, my heart pounding the entire time. My eyes kept darting towards the basement. Was that woman really gone?
Baby, your dress looks amazing today. It makes your legs look so long and white. I love it.
Jason's voice suddenly sounded in my ear. I turned to see him holding a gleaming kitchen knife close to my legs, as if he was about to chop them off.
Facing his cold gaze, my legs turned to jelly, and I stammered.
I was hiding in the bathroom just to give you a surprise.
Hearing my explanation, Jason didn't press further. Instead, he lovingly took my hand and smiled warmly.
Since you're here, let's make our candlelight dinner together. I even bought your favorite tomahawk steak.
If I left now, he would definitely get suspicious. So, I had no choice but to agree, my heart pounding the entire time. My eyes kept darting towards the basement. Was that woman really gone?
Baby, your dress looks amazing today. It makes your legs look so long and white. I love it.
Jason's voice suddenly sounded in my ear. I turned to see him holding a gleaming kitchen knife close to my legs, as if he was about to harm me.
Lisa, 25 years old, 165 centimeters tall, weighing 100 pounds, was knocked unconscious during a struggle last night at midnight. Is that correct?
After Dr. Williams diagnosed that I had no major issues, a police officer came out, looking serious as he confirmed my information. I nodded repeatedly and quickly told him about Jason.
Yes, that's right. Jason, my boyfriend, was involved in illegal detention. The other party broke free and harmed both of us.
The officer quickly grasped the situation and immediately called his colleagues, instructing them to check on Jason at his home. While waiting for Jason to arrive at the hospital, I learned from the police about what happened after I passed out.
Your cries for help indeed reached nearby residents. They saw a woman wielding a knife chasing after you and called the police, which is why we arrived just as you fainted. When we arrived, she raised her knife after you collapsed, but was startled by the sound of the siren. Seeing the police car, she turned and disappeared into an alley. We're still searching for her.
I anxiously waited for Jason's arrival, and finally, the ambulance pulled into the hospital. I wanted to check on Jason's condition, but was held down by a nurse.
Your body isn't fit for running around the hospital, and it won't help the patient's recovery.
I knew all this, but my anxiety had gotten the better of me, making me overly agitated. Hearing that I couldn't go, I reluctantly lay back down. When I saw Jason again, he was out of danger, his eyes closed, lying on the hospital bed with a pale face, looking lifeless.
How did this happen? Is he badly hurt?
I asked, knowing the answer. Our relationship had always been good. If it weren't for this incident, we would have been preparing for our engagement by now.
His wound is some distance from his heart, and he has some medical knowledge. He performed effective first aid after being injured. However, he tried to retrieve something, causing the wound to tear and leading to significant blood loss. If he hadn't been treated in time.
The doctor trailed off, but the implication was clear. Retrieve something? What could be so important that he would risk his life in such pain to get it? Was he out of his mind? I was full of doubts and astonishment. Everything would only be clear once he woke up.
We found several blood-stained wooden sticks and knives in Jason's basement, all with dried blood from the same person, likely from that crazed woman. Do you know anything about your boyfriend's family?
Jason hadn't woken up yet, so the police had to ask me. I had been with Jason for 3 years and only knew that his parents died in an accident. It wasn't until recently that I learned they were killed by that woman. Whether it's true or not, only Jason can tell when he wakes up. The crazed woman seemed to vanish into thin air. Since that night, she has been nowhere to be found. Surveillance footage showed her disappearing into an alley. We are all normal people, we can't fathom what goes on in a mad person's mind. 3 days later, Jason finally woke up. When I heard the news, I ignored the pain in my body and scrambled into Jason's hospital room. The bed was surrounded by doctors and nurses, but Jason spotted me immediately. He managed a weak smile, his pale face looking even more fragile. I remembered the night he took that blow for me. If it weren't for him, I might not be here today. My eyes welled up, and tears started streaming down my face.
How is he? Is he going to be okay?
He's out of danger now. As long as he rests well, he'll be fine. Don't worry!
Our story had spread throughout the hospital, turning into a tale of a loving couple attacked by a villain, with the man nearly losing his life to save the woman.
After checking Jason's condition, they left us alone in the room.
I held his hand, unable to say a word for a long time.
Did you see everything on my birthday?
Jason's tone was very calm. I had planned not to bring it up since he had just woken up, but seeing him mention it, I could only nod.
Why?
Jason looked at me deeply. After a long pause, he finally spoke.
You were bound to find out about these things eventually. It's better if I tell you myself. Search for the local news from 5 years ago on your phone. The headline is March 22nd Incident.
5 years ago, I hadn't moved to this city yet, so I knew nothing about its events. Following Jason's words, I opened my phone and found the search bar. It was a tragic case. A couple was celebrating their wedding anniversary at home. They had both drunk quite a bit and fell asleep. A woman with severe mental health issues broke into their home and harmed them. Eventually, the smell of their decomposing bodies alerted the neighbors, who called the police, leading to the woman's arrest. Tragically, the perpetrator was able to provide proof of her mental illness and demonstrate that she was in a state of psychosis during the incident, with no guardian around. In the end, the judge could only order her to be strictly monitored in a psychiatric hospital.
This is your family's story?
I asked Jason in disbelief. I had once asked him about his parents, and his expression had been strange. He had only said it was an accident. I thought it had brought up painful memories for him and assumed it was a car accident or something similar, so I didn't press further. But I never imagined his parents had suffered such a fate, explaining why Jason always seemed older than his years.
Yes, I was still in college at the time. My relatives were worried I couldn't handle seeing my parents' bodies, so I never got to see them one last time.
Jason spoke bitterly, seemingly lost in those dark, grim days. I said nothing, just squeezed his hand tightly.
After I graduated, I found that woman. She was living quite comfortably in the psychiatric hospital. Seeing her reminded me of my parents. Why should she live well while my parents and I are separated forever?
Hatred and anger flared in Jason's eyes. It was clear how much pain he was in.
I found her nephew, a gambler. For a few $1,000s, he got her out of the hospital.
I can imagine, just after graduating from college, Jason had that woman brought to his home, only to exact his revenge. Such hatred isn't something that can be resolved overnight. From the time he confined Jane in his home until now, it had been over a year. Almost every few days, Jason would subject her to a brutal beating, forcing her to recall everything she had done in that house.
How could one not be terrified? Men and women might look at their veins being cut open with either calm or terror. They might have begged for mercy, but in the end, they could only wait for the inevitable in silence.
Their son, once he imagines that scene, would be utterly devastated.
All right, now you know what kind of person I am. Whether you choose to stay with me or not, I'll accept it.
My heart was a mix of emotions. As a lover, Jason was impeccable. The umbrella on rainy days, the late-night snacks when I worked overtime, and the time he shielded me from harm, his gentleness was once my perfect dream.
But now, discovering this other side of him, obsessive, violent, and manic, despite all the reasons, I couldn't accept it.
Did they catch Jane?
Seeing my silence, Jason changed the subject.
I think I might know where she is.
After hearing my words, Jason shared his thoughts.
Jane had been confined by me for over a year, knowing nothing about the outside world. Apart from the mental hospital and my home, she has nowhere else to go.
So, you think she might be at your place?
No one would willingly return to a mental hospital, but Jason's home wouldn't hold good memories for her either. But now, with nowhere else to go, and her only nephew long missing, she might just try her luck at Jason's house. The police needed me to identify the scene, so I went with them to Jason's house once more. The place still looked like it did that night. Streamers and balloons floated in the bedroom and living room, and large patches of dried blood told the story of that dreadful night. I led the police to the basement, describing how I had hidden and watched Jason punish the woman.
Was he trying to end her life?
I hesitated, then slowly shook my head after a long pause.
I don't know.
I only knew that if I nodded, my answer would be crucial when Jane was eventually caught and Jason was judged.
How was your relationship? Did he ever hurt you?
He was always good to me. Our relationship was fine. If I hadn't discovered this, we might be planning our wedding now.
Just as I finished speaking, a police officer ran in excitedly from outside.
Captain, we found traces of Jane!
We all went outside and saw a pile of tattered clothes and some dirty fast food boxes near Jason's house, likely scavenged from a trash bin.
Everyone else went after her. This place is so hidden that we couldn't find her until now.
I recalled the terrifying events of that night, the feeling of my heart pounding out of my chest making me dizzy. Eventually, I had to run to the side and start vomiting.
Captain, we've caught her!
I looked up to see Jane being led towards us by the police, her hands cuffed behind her back. Her face still bore traces of dried, dark blood, and her clothes were unrecognizable. She gave us a creepy smile, revealing her yellowed teeth.
The stench from that night, when she was so close to me, seemed to hit me again, making me retch once more.
The police initially wanted me to go home, but I refused. I went with them back to the station, where I found Jason, looking frail, having also come upon hearing that the deranged woman had been caught.
Officers, I can responsibly say that her madness is all an act. She's doing it to lessen her punishment. I admit to my illegal confinement, but I don't want anyone else to fall into the hands of this murderer.
Jane stared at Jason with wide, innocent eyes, as if he were telling a story.
This time, you won't get away so easily. Tell us what really happened with the case 5 years ago.
Let me tell you, my illegal confinement will only get me a few years. If you can't give me an explanation when I get out, I'll come after you again.
The malice in Jason's eyes shocked me. He was no longer the gentle, warm person I once knew. Instead, he was filled with violence and cruelty. Even if everything he did had a reason.
You're right. I wasn't crazy.
What followed was a story that left me utterly bewildered. 6 years ago, Jane was 30, full of hope and dreams when she came to this city. She met a handsome, charming man, and they fell in love. 3 months later, she found out she was expecting.
She joyfully told the man, who then disappeared without a trace.
In despair, she terminated the pregnancy, thinking she would never see him again. But a few months later, she saw him with his wife, happily shopping, cooking, eating, and celebrating their anniversary. That night, she used all her wits to end their lives on their happiest day. She never regretted it, even when she was sent to a psychiatric hospital. But she didn't expect the man to have a child. Blinded by hatred, she held on to her psychiatric diagnosis, refusing to reveal the reason for the murders until today, when Jason's words left her no choice. Jason and I parted ways calmly. Perhaps I couldn't get over the fact that the person I loved could be like this. Jason was also straightforward. He told me that getting Jane into prison was enough for him. As for us, it was all fate.
From now on, I just hope things will get better for both of us.